taking a quick look at this new power station from 70Mi. And actually, this isn't an all-new power station. This thing, they actually had this thing crowdfunded last year. And actually, I almost bought this thing. I almost went in on the crowdfunding thing. Now, we'll talk about that more here in a second because there is some things to talk about with that. And so this thing's got not only this very attractive design, but it's got a lot of unusual and interesting features, like some things we haven't seen before on power stations, including this giant heatsink that sits at the top of the unit. And this thing's basically designed to kind of wick away the heat and keep this thing cool without, relying on the fans totally. Now, as you see, there's actually a really large, like a giant fan. And so basically what that means is that these fans almost never come on with this unit. I mean, it just relies on that heatsink. And then, in the event that it does need to come on, if it starts getting a little too warm in there, that giant fan can just come on and wick away, whatever heat is in there, like real quick, right? So that's just one of the unusual and innovative features. There's a couple more we'll talk about here more in a second. So as you know, if you follow the channel, this is kind of like one of my favorite sizes to have in these power stations, just because you can kind of do a lot with them, right? But they're not too big, they're not too heavy. So we do get 1,000 watt hours or a little above that, right? And then we do get the 1,200 watt inverter. And, all the tests that I've kind of seen with this unit is, 1,200 is pretty, it's almost conservative. And by the way, this isn't like an all-new company either. The 70Mi, they're pretty much really well known for making these dash cams for cars. And as you can see here, they got a lot of models, and they're all pretty highly rated, right? So this is their first power station, but not, it's not their first product by any means. All right, now the fun part, let's just jump in and take a look at the features, the design, and the specs, and just, let's just talk about it. Yeah, I really like this. It's a very attractive looking unit. It's very well laid out, and the spacing on all the ports and everything on the front, it just kind of, it takes up all the space, right? It makes good use of the space. And of course we get everything on the front. Everything on the front, input and output, right? So that's kind of one of the number one things I like to look for. We do get a flat top, and it's very interesting. We haven't kind of seen this solution to a handle before, right? So we actually have this, and this is like a silicone insert as well. So it'll give you a nice good grip on it. And then on the side here, you can see that this, basically the entire side of this thing is like a giant vent. So, they've taken the cooling real serious with this unit. And another thing too is like, with NMC batteries, this is just an extra good idea, like trying to keep this unit cool. And then one of my favorite features is actually this LCD screen, this LCD color screen. Actually, let me zoom in here real quick. So this is one of the only models I've seen. In fact, I thought this was the only power station that had a LCD screen like this. It isn't touchscreen, but it's a full LCD, right? And I thought this was the only power station that had something like this until I just reviewed that Champion model the other day that also had the same kind of, color LCD screen. But they're, 70Mi is doing it right with this thing. Because unlike that Champion, which just kind of had a basic generic screen, and it didn't really even have a reason to have that screen, because it didn't have any kind of buttons or menu. It didn't change the look of the screen. This thing's got all of that. So basically, the color of this ring will basically change depending on, if you're low state of charge or if you're charging it. And we get this menu that's built in with all of these kind of like shortcut buttons to it. And basically, this thing does have an app as well with Bluetooth, but you can basically do everything in that app right from the unit, right? And one thing I really like about the graphics they're using on the screen is, as you see here, they're basically showing like an output load and then, how much time is remaining. But actually, if you have like an AC load and a DC load outputting at the same time, they kind of change up the screen as you see there and just give it a whole new look, a linear bar graph for the battery, right? So just little cool details like that I like to see. Now we definitely got to talk about these lights because this is a very unusual design choice. Most of these power stations have LED lights on these things, right? But that's not this. These are basically like two extra LCD screens, but they just light up white, right, to give you some extra light. So these probably aren't going to be too pleasant for your eyes, to look at. But if you do need a little bit of light, they'll give you that, right? So this isn't going to be like a nice ambient light to just leave on. But, the one thing I will say that is kind of nice with the overall design of this unit is just like your smartphone, right? Like when the screen's not on, you kind of get a nice dark appearance to, where the screen is or where the light is, right? So yeah, it doesn't have just those giant like white squares in it, all the time, even when the lights are off. So it just gives the power station a cleaner look, right? Now moving down, we do get two inputs, but this is actually a shared input. So we get an 8mm and an Anderson. but you know, you can't use both of those at the same time. Now we'll talk about the charging specs here more in a little bit. And we get the usual USB and 12-volt outlets, right? Just one thing to note, we only get one high power USB-C, and it's just 60 watts. And then we get the 3 AC outputs, 1200 watts as I mentioned, and good spacing on these as well. And I just realized that I did make a mistake. There is the input, you know, for the wall charger is on the back side. So not everything on the front side. These input ports on the front here are just solar. But what's nice about this is it is, you know, there's no adapter, there's no power brick, right? It's actually using a bi-directional inverter. So pretty good specs there. Now it doesn't have a UPS, but it does have pass-through, right? So you can be charging this thing from the wall and then outputting power out of these AC ports at the same time. And kind of interesting, I'm not exactly sure how they're doing this, you know, with the bi-directional inverter, if, you know, they're bypassing the battery, but, you know, there's no actual UPS relay or what. So, and now the disappointing part, this is the solar MPPT, yes, but, you know, 6.5 to 13 hours. Basically, and they got to fix that spelling error there. Basically, it's 200 watt max. And I believe they don't actually have it on this listing, but from what I remember, I think it's only 28 volts. These are basically like real old solar specs, right? And it doesn't even look like they're giving you any kind of MC4, you know, solar cable either. So you just get, you know, the power cord and the car stuff, but they do give you a nice bag. So as I mentioned, this thing was crowdfunded last year, and I almost went in on this thing, you know, because all these innovative features, you know, it definitely caught my attention. And the price they had on this thing, as you can see here, pretty good prices they were offering on this thing, you know, $760 with some solar panels, $845 with two. And over here, kind of this faded out, you can see $649 they were offering just for the unit. Now, I'm glad I didn't go in on this thing because actually, if you read the discussion here, and by the way, this thing is still up, so I'll provide a link to this thing on Indiegogo so you can kind of take a look at this thing and read through. This is, the discussion is basically where all the people who went in on this thing, once they got their power station, they're kind of talking about it and talking about some of the issues they had, right? And people did have issues with this thing, which is not a huge surprise, you know, kind of being, you know, it's production, but it's kind of like, you know, real early production. You're probably going to have some issues with these things. So it's just a good idea not to do these crowdfunding things in general unless you're just like a super enthusiast, right? And these crowdfunding things just seem to always lead to unhappy customers. It's not good for the customers. It's not good for the company to kind of get like a bad reputation right out of the gate, right? You know, it seems like if there's not problems, there's going to be like a delay, right? I mean, people will just be waiting and waiting longer than they expected to get their power stations. Or maybe, you know, something might happen like what happened with Blue Eddy when they first launched the AC200. You know, people were gung-ho about that thing. And basically, you know, right after the production units came out, they upgraded it to LFP batteries, right? And that has kind of pissed a lot of people off. And then lastly, just one little thing that I noticed that they didn't fix, and I'm a little disappointed to see, is they still have these USB ports upside down. So the actual slot should be at the bottom, you know, basically it should be reversed. So yeah, I was hoping to see a few little changes on this unit. It doesn't look like they've done that, but hopefully they have ironed out kind of the little software issues that they seem to have. And, you know, I still really like this unit. I'm still really intrigued by this thing. You know, I don't know if I would buy it like right out of the gate here. Like I said, maybe just wait for some of the reviews to come in. And maybe for them to lower the price a little bit as well, right? We have so much competition now. But yeah, definitely a cool and quirky unit and something you might want to just at least take a look at. And hopefully you just found this video interesting or helpful. And yeah, thanks for watching.